The bond snapped into place beneath a ceiling of golden fire, and Lyra Hale knew she had been condemned before the man destined to love her even opened his mouth. Thousands of wolves filled the Suncrest ceremonial arena, their faces turned toward the raised marble platform where Lyra stood trembling beneath the full moon. White silk clung to her petite, lithe body. Silver chains circled her bare arms. The ancient mating sigil painted across her collarbone glowed faintly, responding to the alpha blood standing 6 feet away. Cassian Vale, future alpha of Suncrest, stared at her as though the moon goddess had laid something rotten at his feet. The scent of their newly awakened bond flooded the arena. Cedar smoke. Winter berries. A sharp, electric sweetness that wrapped around Lyra's heart and pulled. Her wolf surged toward him with a desperate cry. Mate. For one breathless second, hope pierced 21 years of humiliation. Cassian's handsome face twisted with disgust. No. The single word carried through the arena. Lyra stopped breathing. Cassian turned from her and addressed the gathered pack. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in the crimson ceremonial coat of the future alpha. Gold embroidery marked his powerful bloodline. Pride radiated from him in suffocating waves. "There has been a mistake," he announced. Whispers spread across the stone tiers. At the base of the platform, Alpha Garrick Vale rose from his throne. Cassian's father was a hard, silver-haired man who worshipped strength as though it were a god. "The moon goddess does not make mistakes," Garrick warned. Cassian's jaw tightened. His gaze returned to Lyra, cold enough to cut. "Then she has tested me." Lyra felt every eye in the territory settle upon her. Cassian stepped closer. The bond tugged painfully between them, begging him to touch her, protect her, claim her. Instead, he caught Lyra's chin in one hand and forced her face upward. She refused to lower her eyes. His fingers tightened. "This is what I have been given?" he asked the crowd. "An Omega who cannot shift properly. A woman with no elemental gift. A defective bloodline that has produced nothing of value for 3 generations." Laughter broke out among the younger warriors. Lyra's stomach turned, but her expression remained still. Cassian leaned near enough that only those closest could see the cruelty shining in his blue eyes. "You thought becoming my mate would save you," he murmured. "No," Lyra answered quietly. "I thought honor might save you." His hand dropped from her face. A dangerous silence fell. Cassian's pheromones struck the air with the force of a physical blow. Several Omegas in the front rows bowed their heads instinctively. Lyra's knees threatened to buckle, but she locked them in place. She had spent her life being ordered to kneel. She would not begin now. Cassian's cheeks darkened. "Bring her forward," he commanded. A female warrior climbed onto the platform. Seraphine Cross was massive, nearly as tall as Cassian, with muscular arms and bronze hair braided down her back. She wore black battle leathers instead of ceremonial silk. 3 claw-mark scars crossed her left cheek, trophies from the border wars. She had tormented Lyra since childhood. Now she smiled. Cassian seized Seraphine around the waist and pulled her against him. The arena erupted in shocked voices. Lyra's wolf whimpered inside her. Cassian drew the ceremonial blade from his belt. Its obsidian edge had been blessed in moonlight and used for every alpha mating declaration in Suncrest history. He sliced his palm. Then he cut Seraphine's. Their blood mingled as he pressed their hands together. "I reject Lyra Hale as my fated mate," Cassian declared. "I refuse the weakness of the bond forced upon me. Before the moon goddess and the Suncrest pack, I choose Seraphine Cross as my future Luna." The bond inside Lyra tore. Agony ripped through her chest. She stumbled once. Only once. The pain was beyond anything she had imagined. It felt as though invisible claws had entered her ribs and dragged across her soul. Her wolf screamed, a sound of confusion and grief that echoed through every hidden corner of Lyra's mind. Cassian flinched. He felt it too. For a fleeting instant, his arrogance cracked. His hand rose toward his chest. Something uncertain entered his expression. Then, Seraphine wrapped an arm around his neck. Cassian looked at the warrior he had chosen, and pride restored the cruelty in his face. He lowered his mouth to Seraphine's throat and bit. The crowd roared. Blood welled beneath his teeth. Seraphine threw back her head in triumph, gripping his shoulders as the false mating mark burned into her skin. Lyra remained standing 3 paces away, while her fated mate marked another woman. The mating sigil across Lyra's collarbone turned black. A gasp passed through the elders. Pain exploded beneath her skin. The silver chains around her arms rattled as shadows flickered along the platform. No one noticed. Every gaze was fixed on Cassian and his chosen Luna. Lyra noticed. For years, shadows had moved when she was frightened. They gathered beneath her bed during nightmares. They stretched toward anyone who threatened her. Sometimes, just before danger struck, she saw brief flashes of what was coming. She had hidden those moments because Suncrest feared magic it could not classify. Now darkness curled around her bare feet like smoke. A woman in the front row shouted, "Remove the defective one." Another voice called, "She will curse the ceremony." Cassian released Seraphine and wiped the blood from his mouth. He did not look at Lyra when he spoke. "Strip her crest." Lyra's mother made a broken sound from the crowd. Mara Hale stood among the lower-ranked families, one hand pressed over her mouth. Beside her, Lyra's father stared at the ground. Neither moved. Neither protested. 2 enforcers approached Lyra. One carried iron restraints. The other held a narrow branding knife. Lyra's heartbeat slowed. The Suncrest crest had been carved into her left shoulder when she turned 16. A rising sun surrounded by 7 rays. It declared that she belonged to the pack and was protected by its laws. The larger enforcer grabbed her arm. "Hold still." Lyra looked beyond him to Cassian. "Is this your order?" He finally faced her. Perhaps he expected tears. Perhaps he wanted pleading. A public collapse would turn his rejection into a victory. Lyra gave him nothing. Cassian's nostrils flared as her scent reached him. The damaged bond still recognized her, still called to him. His eyes flashed wolf gold. Seraphine noticed. She curled possessively against his side. "Do it," Cassian said. The branding knife touched Lyra's shoulder. Steel sliced through flesh. Fire tore down her arm as the enforcer carved the crest away. Blood ran beneath the white silk, staining it crimson. The crowd watched in terrible fascination. Lyra did not scream. She fixed her gaze on Cassian and forced herself to remember every detail. The angle of his arrogant chin, the gold clasp at his throat, the faint tremor in the hand resting against Seraphine's waist. One day, she thought, you will remember this moment too. The shadows beneath the platform thickened. A vision struck her without warning. Black mountains beneath a silver moon. A throne carved from obsidian. A towering man with eyes darker than midnight, his hands covered in blood as he knelt before her. Then the image vanished. The enforcer shoved Lyra to her knees. Cassian descended the platform steps and stopped in front of her. "Lyra Hale," he announced. "You have no crest, no mate, and no place within Suncrest territory. By my authority as future Alpha, you are banished beyond the northern border." A murmur of unease passed through the elders. Everyone knew what lived beyond the northern border. Rogue wolves, ice wraiths, creatures warped by old magic. Banishment there was not exile. It was execution without blood on the Alpha's hands. Lyra rose before anyone could order her to. Blood dripped from her fingertips. Cassian watched her with open irritation. "You may beg for mercy." Lyra stepped close enough that the guards reached for their weapons. The broken bond twisted between her and Cassian. She could feel his wolf straining toward her beneath his skin, furious at the rejection, confused by the scent of its true mate. "You will receive none from me," Lyra said. Cassian's face hardened. "Take her." The enforcers dragged her from the arena. The pack parted as she passed. Some stared with satisfaction. Others looked away in shame. Her mother wept silently, but she did not step forward. Lyra left the only home she had ever known without shedding a single tear. By the time they reached the northern gate, night had swallowed the territory. Snow fell in thick, wind-driven sheets. Beyond the iron barrier stretched a wilderness of black pines and jagged ravines. No patrol fires glowed in the distance. No roads cut through the drifts. One enforcer removed Lyra's iron restraints. The other shoved a thin gray cloak into her arms. "That should keep you warm for an hour," he said with a grin. Lyra glanced at the forest. Generous. His smile vanished. He struck her between the shoulder blades and sent her sprawling beyond the boundary stones. The gate slammed shut behind her. Ancient locks turned. Lyra lay in the snow, listening to the retreating footsteps of the men who had delivered her to death. The wound on her shoulder throbbed. Her ceremonial dress was already soaked through. The thin soles of her shoes offered no protection against the ice. She pushed herself upright. Behind the gate, Suncrest's golden towers glimmered against the night sky. She turned away from them. The cold deepened as she entered the forest. Branches clawed at her cloak. Wind hissed through the trees. Every breath burned her lungs. Lyra walked until the lights of Suncrest disappeared. Only then did she stop. Her body shook violently. Her wolf remained curled inside her, wounded by the shattered bond and too weak to lend warmth. Lyra pressed a hand to her bleeding shoulder. "You are not dying here," she whispered. Something moved between the trees. Her head lifted. A flash of silver crossed her vision. She saw herself falling beneath gray bodies, teeth at her throat, blood spreading across the snow. The vision vanished. Growls surrounded her. 6 wolves emerged from the darkness. They were enormous, but starvation had hollowed their flanks. Foam gathered around their jaws. Their eyes glowed a sickly red, marking them as rogues who had surrendered completely to madness. Lyra backed against a pine. The largest wolf advanced. Her omega scent filled the clearing. Wounded, unclaimed, vulnerable. The rogues began to circle. Lyra searched the ground for a weapon and found a broken branch half buried in the snow. She tore it free and gripped the jagged end with both hands. The wolves seemed amused. One darted toward her. Lyra swung. The branch struck its muzzle. It recoiled with a snarl, then lunged again. A shadow shot out from beneath Lyra's feet. It wrapped around the wolf's foreleg. The rogue crashed into the snow. Lyra stared. Darkness moved around her like a living cloak. The other wolves hesitated. Then the pack leader howled. They attacked together. Lyra raised the branch. A roar split the night. It was not the howl of an ordinary alpha. It rolled through the forest like thunder breaking a mountain apart. The rogues froze. A man stepped from the shadows. He was towering, powerfully built, and dressed in a long black coat dusted with snow. Dark hair swept back from a face carved into harsh, devastatingly handsome lines. His eyes burned silver beneath straight brows. A pale scar crossed the side of his throat and disappeared beneath his collar. The air changed around him. His alpha pheromones crashed through the clearing, ancient and merciless. Every rogue dropped to its belly. Lyra's wolf lifted its head. The stranger removed his coat and let it fall behind him. "Run," he told the rogues. The largest wolf snapped its jaws. The man smiled. It was a terrible smile. Wrong answer. His body exploded into motion. Bones cracked. Muscle expanded. Black fur swept across his skin as he shifted in a blur of supernatural force. A colossal wolf landed where the man had stood. He was larger than any creature Lyra had ever seen, with fur as black as volcanic glass and eyes like twin silver moons. One swipe of his claws opened the first rogue from throat to chest. The others scattered. He hunted them without mercy. One rogue leaped for his back. The black wolf twisted in midair and caught it by the neck. Bone snapped between his jaws. Another tried to flee into the trees. The black wolf struck it from behind and crushed its skull beneath one paw. Snow turned red. The slaughter lasted less than a minute. When the last rogue fell, silence returned to the clearing. The black wolf stood among the bodies, steam rising from his fur. Then he looked at Lyra. Her instincts ordered her to kneel. She tightened her grip on the broken branch instead. The wolf approached. Each step was slow, deliberate, and powerful enough to leave deep impressions in the snow. Lyra's wounded wolf moved inside her. Not in fear, in recognition. The black wolf stopped inches away, his enormous head lowered. He inhaled near Lyra's throat. A violent shudder passed through his body. Silver eyes widened. He shifted back. The man rose naked from the snow, apparently untouched by the freezing wind. His chest was broad and scarred, marked by battles that should have killed him. A jagged white scar cut diagonally across his torso. Lyra knew that scar. Every child in Suncrest had heard stories about the Alpha King of the Obsidian Peaks, a ruthless ruler who had united the northern packs through blood, a monster who broke invading armies and offered sanctuary only to those he judged worthy. Ronan Thorne. His gaze swept over Lyra's torn dress, bleeding shoulder, and makeshift weapon. Then he looked toward the distant Suncrest border. "Who did this to you?" His voice was low enough to make the trees seem to listen. Lyra lifted her chin. "No one who matters." Something fierce ignited in Ronan's eyes. He stepped closer, towering over her. His scent reached her at last. Night air, black stone, wild forests after rain. Her wolf surged upright. Mate. The word struck harder than Cassian's rejection. Ronan went utterly still. His nostrils flared as he breathed in Lyra's scent again. Hunger sharpened his face, but beneath it lay something more dangerous. Wonder. His gaze locked onto hers. "Impossible," he whispered. Lyra's frozen fingers loosened around the branch. Ronan caught it before it fell. For one suspended moment, they stared at each other while blood steamed across the snow around them. Then his eyes dropped to the place where Suncrest had carved away her crest. A growl rolled from his chest. It was not the sound of a man discovering a helpless exile. It was the sound of a king discovering that someone had dared to wound what belonged to him. Ronan lifted his black coat from the ground and wrapped it around Lyra's shaking body. The warmth and scent of him swallowed her. "Tell me your name." "Lyra Hale." He repeated it softly, as though testing how it felt on his tongue. "Lyra." The shadows curled around their feet. Ronan noticed them. His silver gaze sharpened, but he asked no question. Instead, he slid one arm beneath her knees and lifted her against his chest. Lyra stiffened. "I can walk." "I know." "Then put me down." No." Even exhausted, she glared at him. The feared Alpha King looked down at her defiance and smiled for the first time. This smile was nothing like the one he had given the rogues. It was slow, dark, and captivated. Behind him, the ancient mountains rose beyond the forest, black beneath the full moon. Ronan turned toward them with Lyra held securely in his arms. "Suncrest threw you into my territory expecting you to die," he said. Lyra looked back once at the distant golden glow beyond the trees. "Yes." Ronan's hold tightened. "Then Suncrest has made its final mistake." The fortress of the Obsidian Peaks appeared through the storm, like something carved from the bones of the mountain itself. Black towers rose above sheer cliffs, their narrow windows burning with silver fire. Walls of volcanic stone followed the natural ridges, impossible to scale, and guarded by warriors whose eyes glowed in the darkness. Ancient runes pulsed beneath the snow, forming a barrier so powerful that even the wind seemed to bow around it. Lyra stared from within Ronan's coat as he carried her across a bridge suspended over a bottomless ravine. She had expected iron gates, chained prisoners, and the brutal silence of a tyrant's domain. Instead, she heard laughter from the guard towers. Warm light spilled from occupied homes built inside the mountain's protective embrace. Children ran through the lower courtyard, throwing snow at warriors returning from patrol. An elderly Omega stood beside the gate distributing steaming cups to anyone who passed. No one lowered their eyes when Ronan approached. They straightened with respect, but not terror. Ronan carried Lyra through the opening gates without slowing. Every wolf in the courtyard noticed the blood on her dress. Every head turned toward the crest carved from her shoulder. A dangerous stillness spread. Lyra braced for disgust. A broad warrior with a shaved head stepped forward instead. Who hurt her? Ronan's silver eyes flashed. Suncrest. Growls rolled across the courtyard. Not one was directed at Lyra. The realization unsettled her more than cruelty would have. Ronan entered the central keep and climbed a wide staircase, still holding her as though she weighed nothing. Lyra had stopped arguing. The cold had sunk too deeply into her bones, and the strange security of his arms threatened to break through defenses she had spent years building. Servants opened doors before him. None appeared surprised by his nakedness or the blood drying across his skin. They seemed accustomed to their king returning from violence. A dark-haired woman in a physician's gray robes hurried toward them. "My chambers," Ronan ordered. "Now." The woman looked at Lyra's shoulder and swore. "Put her in the healing wing." "My chambers are warmer." "Your chambers are also where you brood, sharpen weapons, and frighten reasonable people." Ronan's expression did not change. "They are secure." The physician exhaled sharply. "Of course they are." Lyra watched the exchange with disbelief. No one spoke to an alpha that way, in Suncrest. They certainly did not interrupt one. Ronan carried her into a vast room built against the mountain's heart. A fire blazed in a stone hearth. Tall windows overlooked the storm-shrouded peaks, and black shelves covered in books lined the walls. There was no gold, no excessive display of rank, only dark wood, heavy furs, maps, weapons, and the quiet severity of a man who valued usefulness over beauty. Yet the room felt more welcoming than any place Lyra had ever called home. Ronan placed her gently on the edge of his bed. The physician approached with scissors and clean cloth. "My name is Malin," she said. "I need to remove the fabric around your wound." Lyra nodded. Malin cut through the blood-soaked silk. When the mutilated crest was exposed, Ronan turned toward the hearth. His hands closed into fists. The fire bent toward him. Lyra felt his rage ripple through the room. It pressed against her skin, vast and violent, but never once did it feel aimed at her. "Ronan," Malin warned. His shoulders rose with a slow breath. The flames settled. He remained facing away as Malin cleaned the wound. Lyra endured the sting without making a sound. Malin's mouth tightened. "You may curse." "It will not make it hurt less." "No, but it may make me feel better." A reluctant breath escaped Lyra. It was almost a laugh. Ronan looked over his shoulder. The fierce tension in his face softened when he saw her. Malin applied a salve that cooled the torn flesh, then wrapped Lyra's shoulder in white linen. "The damage will heal. The scar will remain unless we use moonstone treatments." "Use them," Ronan said. Lyra looked at him. "No." Both Ronan and Malin stilled. Lyra touched the edge of the bandage. "I want the scar." Ronan crossed the room. He stopped close enough that his heat reached her, but he did not touch. "Why?" "Because one day they will have to see what they did." Pride burned in his silver eyes. "Then it stays." Malin finished her examination and ordered food, hot water, and several nights of uninterrupted rest. Before leaving, she pointed at Ronan. "She needs calm." His brow lifted. "I am calm." "You slaughtered 6 rogues and carried your mate through a blizzard while radiating enough aggression to start an avalanche." Lyra's pulse stumbled at the word mate. Ronan's gaze snapped to her. Malin seemed to recognize her mistake. She cleared her throat and left quickly. Silence filled the room. The broken bond to Cassian still ached like a blade lodged beneath Lyra's ribs. Yet, beneath that pain, something new had begun to stir. A silver thread stretched between her and Ronan. It was faint, unformed, but alive. Every breath he took seemed to draw it tighter. Is she right? Lyra asked. Ronan did not pretend ignorance. Yes. The answer came without hesitation. How? The moon goddess rarely grants a second bond. Cashin rejected me. Cashin rejected a sacred gift because he was too weak to recognize its value. Ronan crouched before her. Even kneeling, he seemed enormous. A rejected bond can die. Sometimes what remains finds its true destination. Lyra searched his face for ambition, hunger, or triumph. She found all three, but they were restrained beneath something deeper: reverence. You are the Alpha King, she said, and I am an outcast with a damaged wolf. A growl vibrated through his chest. Do not repeat their lies in my home. Her spine stiffened. They are facts. No. They are judgments made by fools. He leaned closer, silver eyes locking onto hers. You faced 6 rogues with a broken branch. You survived the destruction of a fated bond without giving your enemies a single tear. Shadows answered you when death approached. Nothing about you is broken. Lyra's heartbeat became painfully loud. You saw the shadows. I did. You are not afraid? Ronan's mouth curved faintly. Little wolf, I have been searching for something powerful enough to frighten me for most of my life. Heat spread beneath her skin. Ronan noticed. His nostrils flared, and his pupils expanded, until only thin rings of silver remained. He rose abruptly and stepped away. You need food. The distance felt like a loss. Lyra hated herself for noticing. Ronan gave her his rooms that night and slept outside the door in wolf form. She learned this only when she woke from a nightmare and opened the door to find an enormous black wolf lying across the threshold. His silver eyes opened instantly. Lyra stood barefoot in one of his shirts, the fabric falling nearly to her knees. The black wolf lifted his head. She should have been frightened. Instead, she sank to the floor and leaned against the wall. Ronan watched her quietly. I saw the ceremony again, she whispered. His ears flattened. Lyra wrapped her arms around her knees. When he rejected me, part of me still wanted him to change his mind. I hate that. Ronan shifted. A moment later, he sat beside her in human form, wearing the black trousers he had left folded nearby. A bond is not obedience, he said. Your wolf mourned what it was promised. That does not mean your heart chose him. My heart feels foolish. Your heart survived. His shoulder rested near hers, close but not touching. There is no foolishness in surviving. Lyra turned her face toward him. The firelight from the room traced the hard line of his jaw and the scars across his chest. Why are you sleeping outside? You are injured. There are other rooms. None between you and every entrance to this floor. Possessiveness roughened his voice. Nothing reaches you without passing through me. She should have resented the declaration. Instead, the wounded part of her relaxed for the first time in years. Ronan gave her everything and demanded nothing. Fresh clothes appeared in her wardrobe, chosen for comfort rather than display. Books about ancient magic arrived beside her breakfast. Malin visited daily, and warriors escorted Lyra whenever she explored the fortress, though Ronan made it clear they were guards, not jailers. Within days, Lyra discovered that the Obsidian peaks sheltered exiles from dozens of packs. Betas rejected for questioning corrupt alphas. Omegas, who had escaped forced bonds. Warriors whose injuries had made them inconvenient to bloodline-obsessed leaders. Here, strength was measured by loyalty, discipline, and courage. A scarred Omega commanded the fortress kitchens with enough authority to silence armed soldiers. A one-eyed Beta supervised border intelligence. Malin had once been banished for refusing to let an Alpha execute a sick child. Ronan had given them sanctuary. They had given him absolute loyalty. Lyra began joining him for breakfast. At first, they spoke only about the territory. Ronan explained the mountain defenses and the treaties he had forged. Lyra listened, surprised by the intelligence beneath his fearsome reputation. He ruled with ruthless efficiency, but he remembered the names of every fallen soldier. He knew which villages needed medicine and which children had recently shifted. He never ate until the guards completing the night patrol had been served. In return, Lyra told him about Suncrest. She described its obsession with bloodlines, its hidden divisions, and the way Cassian's father manipulated weaker families. Ronan never interrupted. He treated her observations as valuable intelligence. The first time he asked her opinion during a council meeting, the room fell silent. Lyra had stood near the wall, assuming she was there merely to observe. Ronan looked directly at her. "You know Suncrest better than anyone here. What are they planning?" She studied the map. "Nothing yet. Cassian believes I am dead. He will focus on securing Seraphine's legitimacy. And when he learns you survived, he will come for me." Several council members growled. Ronan leaned back in his chair. "Why?" "Because my survival makes him look weak." Lyra met his gaze. "And because the bond will not let him forget me." Darkness swept through Ronan's expression. The silver thread between them flared hot. Shadows stirred beneath the council table. Every flame in the chamber bent toward Lyra. She sucked in a breath. Ronan rose. The others reached for weapons, but he lifted one hand. "No one moves." He walked around the table and stopped before her. "Look at me." Lyra obeyed. The shadows climbed her ankles, soft as silk. Fear tightened her chest. "I cannot control it. Not yet." Ronan extended his palm. "Take my hand. What if I hurt you? Then I heal." His certainty steadied her. Lyra placed her hand in his. Power detonated between them. Silver light raced across Ronan's skin. Black shadows spiraled up Lyra's arm and wrapped around his wrist. The entire fortress seemed to shudder. A vision tore through her mind. Ronan stood on a battlefield beneath an eclipsed moon. Blood covered his scarred chest. Cassian lay at his feet. Lyra herself descended from the sky in a gown of living darkness, her eyes burning silver and violet. She gasped and stumbled. Ronan caught her against him. The vision vanished, but the magic remained. His arm circled her waist, her palms pressed against his bare forearms. Every inch of contact sparked. Their scents collided, night forests and moonlit flowers, creating something richer than either alone. Ronan's wolf pushed close to the surface. His eyes became completely silver. "Everyone out," he commanded. The council chamber emptied in seconds. Lyra remained trapped between his body and the map table. "What did you see?" he asked. "War." His thumb moved once against her waist. "Was I alive?" "Yes." "Were you?" "Yes." "Then we win." She almost smiled. "That is your entire strategic analysis?" "It is the only outcome I will permit." His gaze dropped to her mouth. The air thickened. Lyra could feel his restraint, like iron chains pulled taut. He wanted her. The knowledge was unmistakable. Yet his hold remained careful, allowing her space to move. She stepped back. Ronan released her instantly. That, more than anything, made her want to return. Days became weeks. Lyra's shoulder healed. Color returned to her face. She trained with Ronan each morning in a private courtyard surrounded by black stone. He taught her how to use a blade and how to break a stronger opponent's grip. She learned quickly, guided by flashes of danger that appeared moments before each attack. The first time she knocked him onto his back, the watching warriors went silent. Ronan stared up at her, then laughed. The sound was deep and rare. Lyra stood over him with a wooden knife pressed to his throat. "You let me win. I underestimated you." That sounds like a polite version of the same thing. His hand closed around her wrist. In one smooth movement, he reversed their positions. Lyra landed on the padded snow with Ronan above her. His massive body braced carefully so he did not crush her. Their faces were inches apart. Her breath caught. His scent surrounded her. Ronan looked at her lips, and a growl rolled through him. The shadows beneath them rose in curling ribbons. Silver light flashed in his eyes. For one dangerous second, Lyra wanted him to close the distance. Ronan released her and stood. "Training is over." His voice was rough. That evening, A storm sealed the fortress beneath heavy snow. Lyra found Ronan alone before the fire, reading reports. He wore a loose black shirt with the collar open, exposing the upper edge of the jagged scar crossing his chest. She carried 2 cups of spiced tea and offered him one. "Malin says you forget to drink anything that is not bitter enough to strip paint." Ronan accepted the cup. "Malin speaks too freely. You never punish her. She saved my life." Lyra sat beside him on the wide rug. "Is that how you got the scar?" His fingers touched the pale line. "A silver spear during the Northern Rebellion." "May I see it?" Ronan went still. Lyra expected refusal. Instead, he set down his cup and pulled the shirt over his head. The scar began near his left shoulder and slashed across his powerful chest, ending above his ribs. Lyra lifted her hand, then hesitated. "May I?" His eyes darkened. "Yes." Her fingertips touched the scar. Ronan inhaled sharply. Magic sparked beneath her hand. Shadows spread across his skin, tracing every old wound with delicate black light. Silver fire answered from within him, winding around her wrist. The bond surged awake. Lyra felt his hunger, fierce enough to shake mountains. She also felt the chains he had placed around it. Ronan's hands remained flat against the rug. His claws extended, cutting into the fabric rather than reaching for her. "Ronan!" His eyes closed. "Move away, Lyra." "Do you want me to?" A shudder went through him. When his eyes opened, they belonged to the wolf. "No." The honesty burned between them. Lyra's hand remained over his heart. It hammered beneath her palm. "Then why have you never touched me?" "Because you have spent your life being told what you owe powerful men." His voice dropped into a growl. "You owe me nothing." She shifted closer. Their knees touched. Ronan's control frayed so sharply that the windows trembled. "You carried me here. You protected me. Freely given. You gave me a home. Freely given. You believe in my magic. Because it is real." His gaze held hers. "None of it buys me the right to claim you." Lyra's throat tightened. Cassian had rejected her because she was not enough. Ronan desired her with terrifying intensity, yet refused to take even a kiss she had not chosen. Something wounded inside her began to mend. "What do you want?" she whispered. Ronan leaned forward until his forehead rested against hers. His breath warmed her lips. "Everything," the word vibrated through her bones. "Your trust, your anger, your power, your mornings beside me, and your scent in every room of this fortress. I want every enemy you have to learn fear when they speak your name. I want to mark you so deeply that no wolf alive can doubt where you belong." His claws dug farther into the rug. "But I will not take your surrender while you are still learning that you are free." Lyra's eyes burned. This time, she did not force the tears back. One slipped down her cheek. Ronan watched it fall with an expression of unbearable tenderness. He lifted his hand slowly, giving her time to refuse. When she remained still, he caught the tear with his thumb. "They never deserved these," he said. Lyra leaned into his palm. The silver thread between them blazed. Shadows swept around their bodies, joining with the light pouring from his skin. The fire roared high without consuming the wood. Ronan's wolf surged toward her, wild and possessive, and Lyra's wounded wolf finally rose to meet him. Their noses nearly touched. Their mouths were separated by a single breath. Ronan shook with the effort not to close the distance. Lyra could have kissed him. Every awakened instinct begged her to. Instead, she rested her head against his chest and listened to the violent beat of his heart. Ronan wrapped his arms around her with infinite care. He did not claim. He did not demand. He simply held her while the storm raged beyond the fortress walls. Deep beneath the mountain, ancient magic awakened in answer to their bond. And somewhere far to the south, the man who had rejected Lyra woke screaming her name. Somewhere far to the south, the man who had rejected Lyra woke screaming her name. But in the Obsidian peaks, she heard only the steady thunder of Ronan's heart beneath her ear. For 3 nights after the storm, The fortress remained quiet. Too quiet. Lyra felt it in the shadows first. They no longer drifted lazily around her ankles or stretched playfully toward Ronan whenever he entered a room. They gathered in corners. They pressed against locked doors. They whispered through the ancient stone in a language she almost understood. Danger was coming. On the fourth night, Lyra woke with moonlight pouring across her face. Her eyes opened. She was not in Ronan's chambers. She stood in the council hall, though her body remained asleep several floors above. The room was washed in pale silver. 12 dark figures moved through the walls as if the fortress stone were smoke. Suncrest crests gleamed beneath their black cloaks. One assassin carried a crossbow loaded with silver bolts. Another held a curved blade coated in wolfsbane. At their center walked a thin man with empty white eyes and a chain of blood-red runes wrapped around his wrist. A mage. Lyra's vision shifted. She saw Ronan standing beside the strategy table. A silver bolt entered beneath his ribs. Wolfsbane spread through his blood. He fell to one knee. The mage approached from behind and raised his blade. Lyra tried to scream. The vision shattered. She bolted upright in the darkness. Ronan was gone. His side of the bed had not been slept in. He had spent the evening inspecting the western defenses after a series of false alarms along the mountain pass. False alarms designed to pull warriors away from the central keep. The assassins were already inside. Lyra threw back the blankets and ran. She wore only a thin sleeping dress, but she did not stop for shoes or a cloak. Cold stone struck her bare feet as she raced into the corridor. The shadows followed. They spilled from doorways and flowed after her like black water. A guard turned at the sound of her footsteps. "My lady?" "Seal the gates," Lyra ordered. Suncrest assassins are inside the fortress. The guard's face changed instantly. He reached for the alarm bell. An arrow flashed from the darkness. Lyra saw it before it was fired. She lunged, shoving the guard aside. The arrow struck the wall where his throat had been. A cloaked figure dropped from the rafters. Lyra lifted her hand. Shadow wrapped around the assassin's wrist. He jerked to a halt, his blade inches from her face. For one stunned heartbeat, they stared at each other. Then the darkness tightened. Bone cracked. The assassin screamed as his arm twisted backward. The guard drew his sword and drove it through the intruder's chest. The alarm bell began to thunder. The entire fortress awakened. Warriors poured into the corridors. Doors slammed. Children were rushed into hidden shelters beneath the mountain. Silver flames blazed along the walls as the ancient defenses came alive. Lyra ran toward the council hall. "Find Ronan!" she shouted. A beta captain caught up beside her. "The king is already there." Terror seized her. The vision was beginning. They reached the upper passage just as an explosion shook the keep. Stone fractured. Smoke and red magical fire erupted through the council doors. The beta captain was thrown against the wall. Lyra remained standing. The shadows beneath her feet rose into a shield. She stared at them, breathless. Then Ronan roared from inside the hall. Every thought vanished except one. Save him. Lyra stepped through the smoke. The council chamber had become a battlefield. 3 Obsidian warriors lay wounded near the entrance. 2 assassins were already dead, their bodies torn apart by Ronan's claws. Ronan stood beside the strategy table in a partially shifted form, towering and monstrous, black fur covering his shoulders and arms. Blood ran down his side. A silver bolt protruded beneath his ribs. The white-eyed mage stood behind him. Exactly as Lyra had seen. The mage raised a wolfsbane blade. "Ronan!" He turned at the sound of her voice. The blade descended. Lyra's world broke open. Her terror became rage. Her rage became power. The mountain answered. A shockwave burst from her body and tore across the council chamber. Windows exploded outward. Tables shattered. Every flame vanished. Darkness swallowed the room. Not ordinary darkness. Living darkness. It poured from Lyra's skin, from the cracks between stones, from every hidden place beneath the mountain. It formed talons, wings, and enormous wolf-shaped heads with silver eyes. The mage staggered back. "What are you?" Lyra lifted her face. Moonlight pierced the ceiling. It descended in a blinding column, passing through hundreds of feet of solid rock as though the mountain had opened for her. Her hair rose around her shoulders. Silver and violet fire burned in her eyes. Ancient symbols appeared along her arms, glowing beneath her skin. The Moon-Seer had awakened. One assassin rushed toward her. Lyra looked at him. She saw every cruel choice he had ever made. She saw every path by which he could attack. She saw his death before he moved. The shadow wolves struck. They crossed the chamber without sound and tore through him. His body dissolved into black ash before it touched the floor. The remaining assassins froze. One dropped his sword. Another tried to flee. Lyra extended her hand. Moonlight hardened into a spear and drove through the fleeing assassin's chest. The others attacked together. Silver bolts filled the air. Lyra did not move. The bolts stopped around her, suspended in a ring of darkness. She turned her wrist. Every bolt reversed direction. The assassins had enough time to understand what was happening. Then Silver tore through them. Their screams ended almost instantly. Only the mage remained. He pressed his bleeding palm against the runes around his wrist and began chanting. Red magic erupted across the floor, forming the jaws of a horned beast. Lyra walked toward him. Her bare feet never touched the stone. She floated within the column of moonlight, wrapped in shadows that moved like a queen's cloak. The beast lunged. Lyra's eyes blazed. "Bow." The word shook the fortress. The summoned creature crashed to the floor, its enormous body flattened beneath an invisible force. Cracks spread through the stone. The beast whimpered, shrinking until it collapsed into a pool of red smoke. The mage fell to his knees. His white eyes filled with horror. Moon-Seers are extinct. "No," Lyra said. "You tried to kill the last one." Shadows climbed his legs. He clawed at them, screaming. "Suncrest commanded us. The future Alpha ordered it. Cassian Vale wants the Obsidian King dead." Ronan ripped the silver bolt from his side. A lethal growl rolled through him. Lyra's attention snapped toward the wound, and fear surged again. The shadows reacted. They engulfed the mage. For 1 second, his outline remained visible inside the darkness. Then Lyra closed her hand. Nothing remained. Silence descended. Moonlight still filled the ruined chamber. Black ash drifted across the floor. The shadow wolves gathered around Lyra, waiting for another command. Obsidian warriors crowded the doorway. Malin stood among them, staring with tears in her eyes. The beta captain slowly lowered his sword. Then he knelt. One by one, every wolf in the corridor followed. Warriors bowed their heads. Servants sank to their knees. Even the wounded pressed fists over their hearts. No one had ordered them. They bowed because something ancient within their blood recognized Lyra, not as an Omega, not as an exile, as a power born beneath the first moon. Ronan remained standing. Blood soaked his side, but his silver eyes never left her. Lyra descended to the floor. The moment her feet touched stone, the magic vanished. The shadow wolves dissolved. Moonlight withdrew through the ceiling. The ancient symbols faded from her arms. Her knees gave way. Ronan crossed the chamber before she fell. He caught her against his chest, ignoring his own wound. "I saw you die," she whispered. "I am here. I saw the blade. It never touched me." Lyra clutched him harder. "I could not lose you." Ronan's breath stopped. The fortress seemed to disappear around them. She looked into his eyes and finally spoke the truth that had been growing inside her since the night he carried her from the snow. "I love you." His wolf surged so violently that his eyes flashed completely silver. Ronan pressed his forehead to hers. "Say it again." "I love you." A tremor moved through the feared Alpha King. His arms tightened around her with desperate reverence. You have no idea what you have just given me." Far beyond the mountains, word of the awakening traveled faster than any army. Survivors from the border posts carried reports of moonlight splitting the Obsidian peaks. Traders whispered that an exiled Omega had destroyed trained assassins without lifting a weapon. By dawn, messengers reached Suncrest with a name that had already begun to sound like legend: Lyra Hale, the last Moon-Seer. Cashin received the report in the same ceremonial chamber where he had rejected her. He read it once, then again. His hands began to shake. This is impossible. Alpha Garrick watched from the throne, his face gray. The ancient records described the same power: shadow command, moonfire, visions of death. Cashin crushed the parchment. She had no magic. She hid it, an elder whispered, or Suncrest was too blind to awaken it. Seraphine entered wearing the crimson robes of the future Luna. Cashin looked at the mark on her throat. For weeks, it had felt wrong. Her scent irritated him. Her touch made his wolf recoil. Every night, the broken remains of his bond with Lyra dragged through his chest, filling his dreams with images of dark mountains and silver eyes. Now he understood what he had thrown away. Lyra had not been defective. She had been the most powerful wolf born in a century, and another alpha had found her bleeding in the snow. Cashin imagined Ronan touching her, protecting her, breathing her scent. Rage swallowed reason. She belongs to me. Seraphine's expression hardened. You rejected her. I made a mistake. You marked me before the entire pack. Cashin crossed the distance and seized her throat. His wolf did not recognize her as mate. It never had. He dragged his claws across the mark he had given her, tearing through the false bond. Seraphine screamed. The mating connection ruptured in a blast of crimson light. She fell against the marble steps, clutching her bleeding neck. The elders rose in horror. Cashin barely noticed. Relief flooded him where the unwanted bond had been, followed immediately by the unbearable emptiness of Lyra's absence. He turned toward the gathered council. Call every warrior. Garrick descended from the throne. Think carefully. Ronan Thorne has never lost a war. He has something that is mine. She is not yours. Cashin struck his father hard enough to send him into the throne. Gasps filled the chamber. Cashin's eyes burned gold with madness. She was born in Suncrest. Her power belongs to Suncrest. Her bond belongs to me. You severed it. Then I will forge another. He climbed onto the ceremonial platform where Lyra had once stood trembling before him. In his mind, she no longer trembled. She stood wrapped in moonlight, beautiful and untouchable, while the Alpha King knelt at her feet. Jealousy became poison in Cashin's blood. Send word to the allied packs, he commanded. Suncrest marches on the Obsidian peaks. Seraphine pushed herself upright, hatred burning through her pain. This is not love. Cashin looked toward the northern mountains. No, he said. It is correction. The declaration of war reached the Obsidian fortress at sunset. Ronan read it in silence. Lyra stood beside the strategy table, surrounded by commanders preparing defensive lines. Cashin had rallied nearly 3,000 wolves by promising them access to Moon-Seer power. He intended to breach the fortress, kill Ronan, and drag Lyra back in chains. Ronan folded the message. He will never reach you. Lyra studied his face. Ronan's wound had healed, but the assassination had changed something between them. His control remained, yet she could feel the violence beneath it. His wolf paced constantly along the edge of their unsealed bond. He wanted to claim her. He still waited. That night, Lyra found him alone in his chambers. Snow moved beyond the tall windows. Firelight traced the jagged scar across his bare chest as he stood over a map of the mountain passes. Ronan looked up. One breath of her scent changed his expression. Lyra. She closed the door. His eyes followed the movement. The armies will arrive within 3 days, he said. I know. You should be in the lower sanctuary. No. His jaw tightened. We are not debating your safety. I am not asking permission. Shadow curled around her feet. Ronan's wolf answered with a low growl. Lyra crossed the room until she stood before him. Even with her chin lifted, he towered over her. I spent my entire life letting other wolves decide what I was, she said. Weak, defective, disposable. Ronan's hands closed into fists. You are none of those things. I know. The certainty in her own voice surprised them both. She placed her palms against his chest. Silver light sparked beneath her fingers. You taught me that. Ronan went still. You gave me protection without demanding obedience. You gave me a home without asking me to earn it. You waited when every instinct in you wanted to claim me. His breathing deepened. Lyra, be certain. I saw my future. His gaze sharpened. What did you see? You, on an obsidian throne. Her fingers traced his scar. Where were you? Beside you. The bond flared between them. Ronan caught her waist, then stopped himself before pulling her closer. Lyra rose onto her toes, seized the back of his neck, and dragged his mouth near hers. Mark me. The growl that tore from him rattled the windows. Do not say that unless you understand what happens next. I understand. The bond will join everything. Your magic, my wolf, your pain, my rage. I want all of it. His control cracked. Ronan kissed her. The first contact was explosive. Shadow and moonlight burst through the chamber as his mouth claimed hers with all the hunger he had restrained for weeks. Lyra wrapped her arms around him, meeting his intensity without fear. He lifted her against his body. The fire turned silver. Every window darkened beneath living shadow. Ancient runes blazed across the walls, answering the union of alpha power and Moon-Seer magic. Ronan carried her toward the bed, then paused. Even now, he searched her eyes. Yes, Lyra whispered. That single word shattered the final chain. The night became heat, breath, and the fierce joining of two souls that had crossed rejection, blood, and winter to find each other. Ronan touched her not as something fragile, but as something sacred. Every kiss carried devotion. Every moment asked and received her willing answer. Lyra felt his wolf open to her. She felt centuries of loneliness behind his strength. She felt the burden of the crown, the names of the dead he still carried, and the terror he had hidden when he saw the silver bolt flying toward his heart. Ronan felt her memories in return. The ceremony, the knife carving away her crest, her parents looking down, the freezing borderlands. His rage shook the fortress. Lyra held his face between her hands. I am here now, his silver eyes burned, and you are mine. Only because I choose to be. Ronan's expression softened with fierce pride. Always because you choose. He lowered his mouth to the curve of her neck. His fangs touched her skin. The world held its breath. Mine? He asked. Lyra pulled him closer. Yours. Ronan bit. Pain flashed bright and vanished beneath a wave of ecstasy and power. The mate bond sealed. Moonlight exploded from Lyra's body as darkness erupted from Ronan's. The forces spiraled together, silver and black, rising through the fortress and bursting above the obsidian peaks in the shape of two colossal wolves. Every member of the pack awoke feeling the new bond. The Alpha King had found his queen. Lyra gasped as Ronan lifted his head. Her blood shone silver on his lips. The mark beneath her skin formed not as a simple bite, but as a black crescent surrounded by 7 points of moonlight. She touched his chest. A matching symbol burned over his heart. Their souls locked together. Lyra could feel him completely now. His love was not gentle. It was an ancient, terrifying force that would tear down kingdoms to keep her safe. Ronan pressed his forehead to hers as their magic settled around them. Cashin is coming to take you back. Lyra looked toward the distant south. Through the bond, she felt Ronan's wolf bare its teeth. Her shadows rose in answer. Then let him come. Then let him come. 3 days later, the armies of Suncrest appeared beneath the obsidian peaks. They covered the frozen valley from one black ridge to the other, thousands of wolves and armed warriors standing beneath crimson banners. Their campfires burned like a field of fallen stars. Siege engines groaned across the ice. Silver-tipped spears reflected the pale morning light, and the combined aggression of so many alphas rolled against the mountain in suffocating waves. The Obsidian fortress did not tremble. Its gates remained closed. Its black walls rose from the cliffs, as if they had grown there before the first wolf ever shifted. Ancient runes burned along the battlements, silver and violet, awakened by the newly sealed bond between Ronan and Lyra. Warriors filled every tower. Archers waited behind stone shields. Healers prepared the lower chambers. Shadow-trained scouts moved unseen along the ridges. Every member of the Obsidian pack knew what approached. They also knew who stood between the enemy and their home. Lyra watched the army from the highest battlement. She wore black armor shaped from overlapping scales of enchanted metal. A silver cloak moved behind her in the mountain wind. The mark on her throat glowed beneath the dawn, a dark crescent surrounded by 7 points of moonlight. Ronan stood beside her. He wore no crown. He needed none to appear royal. His black battle armor covered his scarred chest, and an obsidian sword rested across his back. Power radiated from him in vast, controlled waves, but through their mate bond, Lyra felt the fury beneath his stillness. Cassian had brought an army to take her. Ronan wanted to answer with annihilation. Yet he waited. He had promised that her choices would always remain her own. A horn sounded from the valley. The Suncrest ranks separated. Cassian Vale rode forward on a massive gray wolf, dressed in ceremonial gold armor rather than practical battle gear. He had styled himself as a conquering alpha before the first weapon had been raised. His crimson cloak dragged across the snow, and the broken scar of Seraphine's discarded mating mark showed above his collar. Behind him rode Alpha Garrick and the leaders of 5 allied packs. Seraphine was nowhere among them. Cassian stopped beyond the range of the fortress archers. "Ronan Thorne!" His voice carried through the valley, strengthened by Alpha command. "Release Lyra Hale, and I will allow your pack to survive." Laughter rose from the obsidian walls. It was not nervous laughter. It was the sound of warriors hearing a condemned man threaten the executioner. Cassian's face darkened. Ronan placed one hand on the battlement and leaned forward. "You crossed 5 borders, broke 3 treaties, and brought frightened men to die beneath my walls," he called. "You are in no position to offer survival." Cassian's gaze found Lyra. Everything else vanished from his expression. For one raw second, he looked exactly as he had during the Suncrest ceremony, arrogant, possessive, certain that the world existed to affirm his desires. Then he saw the mark on her throat. His wolf erupted behind his eyes. "No." The word came out as a growl. Lyra remained still. Cassian dismounted and stepped closer to the fortress. "You let him mark you?" "I chose him. You were confused." "No. You were wounded because of what happened between us. You ordered my death." Cassian spread his arms as though the truth were an inconvenience he could dismiss. "I was deceived. Your magic was hidden from me. Had I known what you were, I never would have rejected you." The old pain inside Lyra did not return. That surprised her. For months, she had imagined hearing his regret. She had believed it might restore something the ceremony had taken from her. Now his words felt smaller than the snow beneath his boots. "You do not regret hurting me," she said. "You regret discovering that I had value." Murmurs passed through the Suncrest ranks. Cassian's jaw hardened. "You are my fated mate." "You broke that bond before the entire territory." "It can be restored." "I do not want it restored." Alpha power burst from him. The snow around his feet cracked. "You do not understand what you are saying." Ronan moved. His claws extended with a metallic sound. Lyra laid one hand against his arm. The contact calmed the mountain. "I understand perfectly," she said. Cassian stared at the way Ronan yielded to her touch. Jealousy twisted his face. "He has poisoned you against your own people." My own people stripped my crest, carved my flesh, and threw me into the borderlands to be eaten alive. That was punishment for weakness. Lyra's shadows spilled across the battlement. The Suncrest army shifted uneasily. Cassian noticed and changed his tone. He softened his voice, attempting tenderness he had never shown when she needed it. Come home, Lyra. I will restore your crest. I will place you above every wolf in Suncrest. You will be my Luna, and no one will ever mock you again. Ronan's rage moved through their bond like black fire. Lyra looked at the army her former mate had raised to steal her freedom. You still believe a title from you would honor me? Cassian's eyes flashed gold. It would make you legitimate. The mountain groaned. A fracture split the ice between the armies. Moonlight broke through the clouds and fell around Lyra. Every Obsidian warrior lowered their head, not in fear, but recognition. Cassian stepped back. Lyra turned toward Ronan. Their bond opened completely. She felt his need to protect her, his pride, his fear that the world might wound her again, his willingness to become a monster if that was what her safety required. She placed her palm over the matching crescent burned above his heart. This is my battle. His jaw tightened. I know. Will you let me face it? No force alive could stop you. The answer warmed something deep within her. Ronan did not tell her she was too fragile. He did not place himself before her to prove his strength. He stepped aside because he trusted hers. Lyra climbed onto the battlement. 1,000 obsidian wolves inhaled sharply. The valley yawned below her. The drop should have killed anyone who attempted it. Cassian raised one hand. Do not be foolish. Lyra looked directly at him. Then she stepped into the air. She did not fall. Shadows poured from the fortress walls and gathered beneath her bare feet. Moonlight wrapped around her body. Her cloak dissolved into silver sparks as she descended from the battlement, like a dark star falling gently toward the earth. The Suncrest ranks broke into frightened whispers. Lyra landed between the two armies. Snow rose around her in a perfect circle. Cassian stared. He had once looked down upon her as a defective Omega. Now he had to tilt his head back as power lifted her hair and blazed through her eyes. Lyra, he said carefully, come to me. She heard the alpha command inside the words. It struck her body and shattered. Cassian's face went pale. Lyra walked toward him. The snow did not bend beneath her steps. It turned to starlight. You have built your entire life on forcing weaker wolves to kneel, she said. You believed dominance made you worthy. You believed bloodline made you strong. Cassian reached for his sword. I am the future alpha of Suncrest. You are a frightened boy wearing his father's armor. He drew the blade. The allied alphas surged forward. Ronan roared from the fortress wall. The sound rolled over the valley, warning every warrior that death waited one foolish step away. Lyra lifted her hand. Stay. Ronan froze. Not because she commanded his alpha blood, because she had asked him to trust her. Cassian raised his sword. Take her! The Suncrest army charged. Thousands of boots and paws struck the valley floor. Wolves shifted in motion, bodies expanding beneath torn armor. Spears lowered. Archers released a dark cloud of silver-tipped arrows. Lyra closed her eyes. Time slowed. She saw every possible path, every blade, every arrow, every death that could come. Ancient magic opened inside her like a second sky. For 21 years, her wolf had remained silent because it had never been ordinary. It had slept behind seals placed before her birth, waiting for rejection, blood, love, and moonlight to break them. Lyra stopped resisting. The transformation began. Silver fire exploded from her chest. Her body lifted from the ground as bones lengthened and power tore through every hidden barrier. She did not feel pain. She felt release. Shadow covered her skin, not as darkness, but as living armor. Starlight threaded through it. Her hands became enormous paws tipped with translucent claws. Her spine arched. A vast tail swept behind her, woven from black mist and falling sparks. When her paws struck the snow, The valley shook. A platinum spirit wolf stood where Lyra had been. She was larger than the Suncrest siege towers. Her fur gleamed like moonlit metal, each strand edged in violet shadow. Constellations moved beneath her translucent skin. Her eyes burned with the cold brilliance of twin stars. Great ribbons of darkness curled from her shoulders, forming wings that were not wings, but the remembered shape of night itself. The charging armies stopped. Wolves crashed into warriors behind them. Weapons fell from numb hands. Every animal instinct in the valley recognized a power older than alpha law. Lyra raised her head and howled. The sound split the sky. Clouds spiraled apart. The moon appeared in full daylight, enormous and silver above the mountains. Its light crashed over the Suncrest army. Thousands of wolves dropped to their bellies. The allied alphas tried to resist. Lyra looked at them. Shadow chains erupted from the snow and wrapped around their limbs. One by one, they were forced to their knees. Cassian remained standing through sheer desperation. His sword shook in his hand. This is not possible. Lyra stepped toward him. Each footfall sent waves of starlight across the valley. He swung the sword. The blade struck her foreleg and shattered. Cassian stared at the broken hilt. Lyra's enormous muzzle lowered until one silver eye filled his world. He saw himself reflected in it. Not as a future king, as a man who had mistaken cruelty for strength. He shifted into his wolf form with a scream of tearing bone. The golden wolf that emerged was large, powerful, and bred from generations of carefully selected alpha blood. Suncrest warriors had once called it magnificent. Beside Lyra, it looked small. Cassian lunged for her throat. Lyra moved one paw. The impact hurled him across the valley. He struck the snow hard enough to carve a trench through it. Before he could rise, shadows pinned all four limbs to the ground. Lyra advanced. Cassian struggled until blood covered the snow beneath his claws. "You belong to me," he roared through the shattered edge of their former bond. "The moon goddess chose me first." Lyra's voice entered every mind in the valley. "The moon goddess offered you a gift. You chose pride." Cassian's wolf began to shrink. He fought the transformation, but Lyra's dominance reached beyond muscle and blood. It entered the ancient hierarchy within his spirit and found the alpha power he had abused. Silver light gathered around her claws. Cassian returned to human form beneath her paw. He looked up at her, naked, bleeding, and terrified. "Lyra, please." The word he had once invited her to speak now came from his own lips. She remembered the ceremonial platform, the laughter, the knife cutting away her crest. She remembered standing in the borderlands while the gates closed behind her. She could have destroyed him. Her power wanted only a thought. Instead, Lyra reached into the core of his wolf and closed her claws around the golden flame of his alpha status. Cassian screamed. Light tore from his chest. It rose into the air, twisting like a dying sun, and dissolved beneath the platinum radiance of the moon. Across the valley, every Suncrest wolf felt the change. Cassian Vale was no longer an alpha. He was no longer their future ruler. He was an ordinary wolf stripped of the dominance he had used as a weapon. Lyra withdrew her paw. Cassian remained on his knees. "No," he whispered. "Give it back. Strength is not yours to demand. My bloodline. Blood is not character, my birthright. A title without honor is only a costume." Alpha Garrick stared from among the kneeling commanders. The old Alpha tried to summon his authority. Lyra turned her gaze upon him. His command died before it formed. She could have stripped him as well. Instead, she let him feel the full weight of every injustice committed beneath his rule. The memories of banished Omegas, silenced Betas, abandoned children, and warriors sacrificed for pride flooded his mind. Garrick collapsed into the snow. Seraphine appeared at the rear of the Suncrest lines. She wore no crimson robes. Bandages covered the mating scar Cassian had torn open. A group of Suncrest warriors stood behind her, their weapons lowered. She walked forward alone. Cassian looked up with sudden hope. "Seraphine, help me." She stopped several feet away. "You called what you did to Lyra a correction," she said. "You called what you did to me a necessary sacrifice." Cassian crawled toward her. "I made mistakes." "No. You made choices." Seraphine looked at the platinum spirit wolf. Then the massive warrior lowered herself to one knee. "I surrender the Suncrest army to Lyra Thorne, Moon-Seer of the Obsidian Peaks." Silence swept across the battlefield. One warrior followed her, then another. Crimson banners dropped into the snow. Thousands of soldiers bowed. The allied alphas ordered their forces to surrender, desperate to escape the judgment burning in Lyra's eyes. Weapons struck the ground in waves until no spear remained raised against the mountain. The war ended without an Obsidian warrior spilling a single drop of blood. Lyra lifted her head. Moonlight streamed from her body and spread over the wounded. Cuts closed. Broken bones shifted back into place. Poison left the blood of those carrying hidden wolfsbane weapons. She healed enemies who had marched to enslave her, not because they deserved her mercy, because mercy was hers to choose. The spirit wolf dissolved into starlight. Lyra descended through the fading brilliance in her human form. Her armor reformed around her, and her silver cloak settled over her shoulders. Her feet touched the snow. For a moment, exhaustion swayed her. Ronan was there before she could fall. He had crossed the valley without her seeing him move. His arms closed around her, powerful and certain. The Obsidian King looked over her face, searching for wounds. "I am unharmed," she whispered. "I know." His voice broke anyway. Lyra touched his cheek. "You waited. You asked me to. You could have destroyed them. Yes. You let me choose. Always." She pulled him down and kissed him before both armies. The mate bond burst open. Shadow and silver light rose around them. No longer forces in conflict, but parts of the same living power. Ronan held her as though the entire world had narrowed to the woman in his arms. Cassian watched from his knees. This time, Lyra felt no satisfaction in his suffering. Only freedom. He could regret her for the rest of his life. His regret no longer belonged to her. Obsidian warriors crossed the valley to secure the surrendered army. Cassian and Garrick were placed in silver restraints, not to torture them, but to prevent further violence. Seraphine accepted temporary command of Suncrest under strict conditions imposed by Lyra. The bloodline laws would be abolished. Forced mating bonds would become punishable crimes. No Omega would ever again be banished for failing to meet an Alpha's expectations. Suncrest would rebuild without the cruelty it had once mistaken for tradition. As the defeated army withdrew, the gates of the Obsidian fortress opened. The pack filled the valley. Children, healers, elders, warriors, and exiles gathered beneath the black walls. They did not come to celebrate the humiliation of an enemy. They came to witness the rise of their queen. Ronan led Lyra to a platform of natural obsidian at the base of the mountain. The full moon remained visible above them, though daylight still touched the peaks. Malin approached carrying a crown. It had been forged from black metal and platinum crystal. 7 silver points rose from its band, each holding a fragment of moonstone. Shadows moved within the gems like sleeping stars. Ronan took the crown in both hands. Then the feared Alpha King of the Obsidian Peaks lowered himself to one knee. A breath swept through the valley. Lyra looked down at the man who had carried her from the snow. The man who had given her safety without demanding surrender. The man who had seen power in her before she could see it in herself. Ronan's silver eyes held no command, only devotion. "Lyra Hale," he said, his voice carrying across the mountains. "You entered these lands without a crest, without a pack, and without anyone willing to defend your name." The scar on her shoulder warmed. "You stood before my people and proved that loyalty is stronger than blood. You faced an army and chose justice over vengeance. You carry the power of the ancient moon, but that power alone does not make you worthy of this crown." Lyra's throat tightened. Your courage does. Your mercy does. Your refusal to let cruelty define you does. Ronan raised the crown. I do not offer you a place behind my throne. I ask you to stand beside it. Not as my possession, not as a symbol, as my equal, my true mate, and the queen of the Obsidian Peaks. Lyra looked at the gathered pack. No one mocked her. No one demanded that she prove her bloodline. They waited for her answer because, in this place, even a king's request required her consent. She faced Ronan again. I accept. The valley erupted. Howls rose from thousands of throats, powerful enough to send snow cascading from distant cliffs. Ronan placed the crown upon Lyra's head. The moonstones ignited. A crest formed over the scar Suncrest had left on her shoulder. Not a rising sun, not the mark of ownership. A platinum wolf beneath an obsidian moon. The symbol spread across every fortress banner. Ronan rose. Lyra caught his face between her hands and kissed him as her pack celebrated around them. Their bond blazed with memories and promises. The frozen forest where they had met. The firelit nights of healing. The terror of the assassination. The moment he had restrained his instincts and waited for her willing choice. The night their souls joined. The battlefield where he had trusted her to become everything she was meant to be. Months later, the Obsidian Peaks became a sanctuary known across the territories. The gates remained impenetrable to invaders, but they opened for the exiled, the wounded, and the unjustly rejected. Lyra established a Moon-Seer academy where wolves with strange or hidden gifts could learn without shame. Omegas trained beside alphas. Strength was honored, but cruelty was never confused with dominance. Seraphine rebuilt Suncrest under a council elected from every rank. Alpha Garrick lived long enough to watch the laws he had defended disappear. Cassian survived without title or command, haunted not by the power Lyra had gained, but by the knowledge that she had offered him loyalty once, and he had answered with contempt. Lyra rarely thought of him. Her life was too full. She ruled beside Ronan, from twin obsidian thrones. She ran through the mountains, in her platinum spirit wolf form beneath the full moon, with Ronan's enormous black wolf racing at her side. Their magic flowed across the territory, shadow and starlight guarding every home within their borders. Sometimes, during quiet winter nights, they returned to the firelit chamber where he had first promised to wait for her choice. Ronan would touch the crown, resting on the table, and remind her that she had once entered his kingdom wearing a torn dress and carrying a broken branch. Lyra would trace the scar across his chest and remind him that even the most feared king had needed someone powerful enough to teach him surrender. They had not saved each other by erasing the darkness. They had entered it together. Lyra had once believed strength belonged to wolves born with celebrated names, flawless shifts, and unquestioned rank. She had learned that inherited power could vanish in a single moment, while courage forged through suffering became impossible to steal. True strength was not found in the bloodline a person was born into. It was found in the fires of rejection that forged the spirit, in the choice to rise without becoming cruel, and in the one true mate who stood beside you when the world turned dark. If you enjoyed this steamy, magical, and thrilling shifter romance audiobook, please hit the like button and subscribe for more epic stories.